So I wanted to take this opportunity to go over one of the examples we talked about today, um, and really kind of drive home some of the programming that we've been doing, looking at data structures, looking at this new example of file input output. And to do that, we're going to use this lat long code that we started working on today in class, specifically using a flowchart approach initially to outline how we might proceed through some of these later problems. So let's take a look at the code. So if we think about how we're going to start diagramming this code, we can start with creating variables here such as the in file names and the out file names, as well as line number. We then create our file objects such as in file and out file, and these will be the way that we'll both read data in and write data out. After that, we'll proceed into our for loop, and we will loop through every line of the file, and for every line of the file, we'll first evaluate an if statement. If that statement is true, we will execute a series of commands. If not, we will continue on to line number +1, and we'll increment line number. So the first time through is going to look and say is line number greater than 0. It's not greater than 0, right? It's actually equal to 0 the first time through. So what's going to happen is that we will just go straight to incrementing line number. In all later rounds of this loop, this step will, we won't actually continue on because now line number is equal to 1, so the next time through the loop, it's going to push us off into parsing the line, creating all the output that we want to do. After we've, so after the first iteration through this loop, we'll then be operating in this conditional state. And it's a kind of just a little trick to help us avoid that header that's on the first line of this file. So after we've done that, we'll then close our objects after our loop is finished, and then end our program. Now if we go back to our assignment, we have this example where we want to change the output. So instead of what we had been putting out, which was latitude, longitude, and depth, now we're going to put out dive location, which is latitude and longitude, as well as the month, the 4-digit year of the dive, and any associated notes with that dive. And one of the nice things now that we have a diagram of our code is that we're going to be able to go back and actually figure out and use that diagram to figure out, when and where in our code are we actually going to be making changes. And what you can see here is based upon what we're going to be outputting. The section where we're going to be making changes is going to be really associated with what's in this if statement, right? So the rest of the code can all stay the same, and we only need to focus on just one section. It's a nice way of thinking about code, and when you are writing code, like what do I have to change, what don't I have to change, and also for an appreciation of the modularity of code and how we can isolate whatever part we actually want to adjust from the other parts of our code. So if we look at the actual code, we can see that where it's going to be affected is specifically in this area where we're thinking about how we're parsing our data, right? And it's important that we think about what does our actual data sheet look like, what does our actual file look like, because we're going to have to change how we're manipulating the data that's coming in, and how we're going to change it for when it goes out. And the important part to realize here, right, is that we're going to be putting in latitude and longitude, which are going to stay the same as the third and fourth columns of this file. We have to figure out how to extract month and year out of the date field, which is this um, second column, right? And it's in a format where it goes it goes day dash 3-letter month abbreviation dash 2 number year. So we're going to have to do a little bit of finagling and use some existing methods that we've been familiar with to figure out how to accomplish this task. So we'll copy the code that we used from the previous example and then adapt that for this specific task. Again, we're going to be targeting these lines of code that are related to parsing and outputting the data here under the if statement. So one of the first things I'm going to think about is, well, what are the things that I actually need to output that are different than what was before? And I'll look at that slide and figure those things out. So I'm going to be putting out, if I look at the file, right, I'm going to be putting out latitude and longitude, which are the third and fourth fields. So field position 2 and field position 3, that are those items in that list of every line. And then I'm going to have to put in a space for a month and a 4-digit year, and then the last line, field that I will be outputting will be the last column of the file, which is the 6th column, so it's position 5. So I still have to figure out how to get month and year in there, right? And one of the things that you might want to think about is, remember, all information is coming in as text files. So first I'll put in, I'll adjust my outstring. So I've got placeholders for these new variables, this new information that's going to come in. But then I got to figure out how to manipulate the information that I already have to be able to isolate the specific things that I want to isolate. So I'll create a new data structure called dates. And what I'm going to do is I want to make this the place where I'm going to hold this information. So if we look at that second column, right, we had day dash month dash year. And so right off the bat, we might be able to use another existing tool like split, which we used above, but instead of splitting by tab, here we're going to say, hey, I'm going to look at the string that's in field 2, or field 1, excuse me, and I'm going to split it based upon the dash, right? And so the dash is going to be how I can split it up, and I'm going to end up with a list of 3 things. So eventually dates is going to become a list of 3 things. So since field 1 is a string, I can just use the split command, and it comes out pretty straightforward. So now if I wanted to put month in there, I can just say, hey, look at the second item in the dates list, and that will fill in the requirement for month. Now for 4-year date, I actually have to do a little bit more manipulation. So I'm going to create a variable called year before I start my loop. So I'm going to just set it equal to 0 and make it an integer. So I can do some math on it if I need to. So next I'm going to use a little if and else statement in order to figure out if I'm looking at a year or if I'm looking at information that's either from the 2000s or from the 1900s. So here, to do this correctly, right, I have to take these items in this list, which are strings, and recast them as integers. So I'm going to look at the last item in the list, I'm going to call it an integer, and basically I'm going to say if that integer is greater than 3, then it's going to be a 1900. But if it's less than or equal to 3, it's going to be a 2000 prefix. So I can use the if statement. I can then say here is going to be equal to 19 plus whatever value is in that third position. And then I'm just going to use an else condition to say in all other cases it would be equal to 2000. And now I can put in a value for year, so I've got all my placeholders associated with the variable. And then if I run my command, I have a slight error. I think I need to just copy over a copy of Mars Cloud into the directory that I'm currently working on. Again, the locations of files always matter. So I have to tell the computer exactly what I'm looking at. So now when I run it, I'm going to get the information I want: latitude, longitude, month, year, and notes. So the last thing I wanted to show you was this idea about how we can take these 3-digit months and translate them over into a full written month, right? And again, we're going to be dealing with sort of adapting code that's just in this if statement part of the code. So everything else we can just leave the same. And the key way to do this is to mimic something that we did in other instances, and that's to build a dictionary. Right, so we're actually going to build a dictionary of months, and then that's going to allow multiple people to access this dictionary and use it for whatever purposes they need it. So to do this, basically I'm going to create a dictionary of months where the keys are the 3-letter abbreviations for the month, and then colon, the value associated with that key is going to be the month written out as a full, with its full name. You have this library built, then you're going to be able to use it to pull out these full month names. We know dates position 1 is the key for this library, right? This 3-letter abbreviation. So all we have to do is now tell it to use that key to pull out the correct value from the dictionary. And so if we do that, we'll now be able to effectively output the information we want with the full month's name associated with it. And so this is just a nice example of flow control, how to use for loops and if statements, if-else statements, how to use data structures like dictionaries and lists. So thanks again for your time, and hope you enjoy the video.